It all started with the orchids. Not the moving in, not the late night, sorrowful conversations, but the flowers. When Eleanor, my wife's mother, came to live with us last fall, she brought 3 of them. 3 exotic, impossibly perfect white orchids, their petals looking like they were sculpted from angelic wax. She placed them on the living room windowsill, where they caught the morning sun. "They'll bring a little life into the space," she'd said, her voice soft as rustling leaves, just to brighten things up. "Clara, my wife, hug her." I smiled and said thank you. I mean, what else are you supposed to do? Her husband, Clara's dad, had passed 6 months prior, and we were only port in the storm. It was the right thing to do, the noble thing. The thing about orchids is they're demanding. Heck, they're tyrants. They need distilled water, specific humidity, and just the right amount of indirect light. They'll die if you look at them wrong. And somehow, subtly, our entire house began to recalibrate around the needs of these 3 plants. The thermostat was nudged a little higher. The humidifier we usually only ran in deep winter now hummed 24/7, a constant, barely audible hiss. My favorite cross breeze from the kitchen window? Sealed shut now. "For the flowers, dear," Eleanor would say with that placid smile. Then she started helping around the house. It was small at first, reorganizing the spice rack alphabetically, folding my T-shirts by color instead of by, well, my system, minor stuff. But then I noticed the scent of our home changing. The familiar smell of coffee and old books was being slowly overwritten by a cloying, sweet lavender potpourri that Eleanor had placed in little bowls in every room. It was her scent. The house didn't smell like us anymore. It smelled like her. I made a joke about it to Clara one night. "I think we're being slowly colonized," I said with a light chuckle. She didn't laugh. "Don't be like that," she said, an edge to her voice. "Mom's just trying to be useful. She's grieving." And just like that, I was the bad guy. The first hint of a deeper secret came a month in. We were at dinner, and I was talking about a new project at work involving neuromarketing. Tricky stuff. Eleanor listened, her head tilted like a curious bird. "Your father, Clara, never trusted all that newfangled psychology," she said suddenly. "He had a very frail constitution. Always said the best defense was to keep your distance from people who dig around in your head too much." Clara nodded, lost in her food, but I paused. A frail constitution? David, her dad, had been a college football captain and walked 5 miles every morning until the day he died. The real twist came last week. I was working from home, finishing a major presentation. I locked my work laptop and went to the kitchen for coffee. When I came back 5 minutes later, it was unlocked, my final slide with confidential client data displayed on the screen. My stomach dropped. I knew I had locked it. I was positive. Eleanor was sitting in the living room, reading. I asked gently if she'd been near my desk. She looked at me, her wide, guileless eyes welling up. "Why would you ask that, David? Do you think I'm spying on you?" My name is Mark, but in that moment, she called me David, her late husband's name. Clara heard from the other room and, of course, rushed to her mother's defense. We had the worst fight in a decade that night. I slept on the couch. Am I actually losing my mind? Maybe I just forgot to lock it. Stress fatigue, information fatigue. It's plausible. But the doubt was now planted in my head, a toxic little seed. Lying on the lumpy sofa that night, the argument with Clara echoing in the silence, I felt a switch flip. The confusion curdled into a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't going to lie there and let this feeling of disorientation wash over me. Screw feeling guilty. I slipped out from under the quilt that smelled faintly of lavender and padded into my office. Past the orchids, their white petals like ghostly moons in the darkness. They felt less like plants and more like sentinels, silent witnesses to this quiet takeover. I sat at my desk, the only light coming from the monitor as it blinked to life, casting long shadows across the room. My home network logs every device, every connection. It's a side effect of my job cybersecurity paranoia, but tonight it was my salvation. I logged into the router's admin panel, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The interface was a beautiful thing. cold, logical, blissfully free of emotional manipulation. I filtered the activity logs for the exact time of the laptop incident, 2:14 p.m. to 2:19 p.m. My stomach clenched. There it was. My laptop disconnected at 2:14. Then, at 2:16 p.m., Eleanor's tablet active. My heart started hammering against my ribs. A bitter taste of vindication. I wasn't going crazy. She was there. She was on her device while I was gone. But that's not enough. Maybe she was just browsing. A coincidence. So I dug deeper, pulling the DNS query history for her tablet's IP address. This would show me every website she visited. I expected to find social media, news sites, maybe recipes for the bland, mushy casserole she kept making. My blood ran cold. The searches were clinical. At 2:17 p.m., side effects of common blood pressure medication. At 2:18 p.m., early indicators of cognitive decline. And at 2:19 p.m., just before I walked back in, can stress induce memory loss in middle-aged men? Was she researching for herself? Or was she building a case against me? The thought was chilling. It felt less like concern and more like strategy. The worst part was her calling me David. It was a slip, I'm sure. But why was her late husband on her mind when she was supposedly looking at my confidential work? The whole thing felt orchestrated, a play where I was the only one who didn't have the script. She creates a problem, my unlocked laptop, and then provides convenient, pre-researched explanation for it. My failing memory, my stress. It was a move of manipulative genius. It plants a seed of doubt, not just in Clara's mind, but in my own. Am I so stressed that I'm becoming forgetful and paranoid? Then I saw the last search query from that timestamp, the real bombshell. It wasn't a symptom or a condition. It was a name. Dr. Alistair Finch, neurologist. My hands felt numb. Why was she searching for a specific neurologist right after staging that scene? I typed the doctor's name into my own search bar, and my breath hitched. The first result was his professional page at Northwood Medical Center. But the second was a news article from 3 years ago. The headline made the room feel 10 degrees colder. Local neurologist cleared in malpractice suit following patient's fatal accident. The words on the screen swam before my eyes. The room felt airless. I clicked the link. The article was sparse on details, citing legal privacy, but the core facts were there. A family had alleged that Dr. Finch's misdiagnosis and experimental treatment plan had led to the sudden, tragic death of a patient. The patient's name? The article didn't say David. It said D. Miller. But I knew with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the tile on the floor. The official story we were all told, the story Clara wept over for weeks, was that David had a massive, sudden heart attack on one of his morning walks. Simple, tragic, and an act of God. This article suggested something else entirely. It suggested an act of man. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying snap. Eleanor's lie about David's frail constitution. Her research into cognitive decline. Her specific search for Dr. Alistair Finch. Her calling me David. My mind reeled. What was the truth? A heart attack is clean. It's no one's fault. A neurological event, a misdiagnosis, that's messy. That means someone is to blame. And why the charade? Why lie to everyone, especially her own daughter? I sank back in my chair, the faint, sweet scent of lavender from the hallway, now seeming sickly and suffocating. It felt like the fragrance of deceit. My fear wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the present. Why now? Why? After 3 years, was she digging this up again? And what in the world did it have to do with my confidential work presentation and my alleged memory loss? It felt like she wasn't just grieving. She was plotting. She was building a narrative piece by careful piece, and I was being cast in a role I didn't understand. Was she trying to recreate the circumstances of David's decline, but with me as the subject? The thought was so bizarre, so profoundly paranoid, that I almost dismissed it. But the evidence was right there, glowing on my screen. Then a forgotten memory surfaced. The funeral. Amid the hushed condolences and trays of catered sandwiches, I remembered seeing Eleanor in a heated, whispered argument with a man I didn't recognize near the back of the chapel. At the time, I assumed it was just grief boiling over. But now, his face swam into focus in my memory. He was younger, stern-faced, wearing a suit that looked too expensive for a funeral. Could that have been him? The doctor? Or his lawyer? A cold strategy began to form in my mind, displacing the panic. I couldn't confront her directly. She'd just cry, and Clara would see me as a villain, bullying a grieving old woman. I couldn't show Clara the search history. She'd call it an unforgivable invasion of her mother's privacy. No, I had to use Eleanor's own methods. I had to use subtle manipulation. I pulled open the office door, ready to deliver my performance, and I stopped dead. Clara was in the living room, curled on the sofa under the soft glow of a lamp. She wasn't alone. Eleanor was sitting beside her, a photo album open on the coffee table, and in Clara's hand, she was holding a small, framed picture. It was a photo of her father, David, young and smiling, full of a life that was supposedly stolen by a faulty heart. They both looked up as I entered, their quiet conversation cut short, their faces frozen in the dim, lavender-scented air. Seeing them there, huddled together on the sofa under the warm glow of a single lamp, threw me completely off balance. My pre-rehearsed lines about Eleanor's confusion evaporated. They looked like a perfect portrait of a daughter, comforting her grieving mother. I was the intruder, the dark shadow looming in the doorway. Clara looked up, her expression soft and unguarded for the first time in days. "Hey," she said quietly. "We were just looking at old pictures of Dad." Eleanor gave me a small, sad smile. "Remembering the good times," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She patted the cushion beside her, an invitation. Trapped, I walked over and sat down, the scent of lavender and old paper filling my senses. The open album on the coffee table was a minefield. Each photo was a piece of propaganda for the official story, the one where David was a simple, happy man whose heart just gave out. "He always distrusted those fancy computers you use for work, Mark," Eleanor said, looking at me. Her gaze was gentle, but her words were targeted. "He said a man's mind should be his own. All that, what do you call it, that AI stuff? It gave him headaches just thinking about it. A lie, polished to a shine." David had been fascinated by my work. Clara just nodded, a fond, distant look on her face. "Dad was old school," she agreed. "See?" Eleanor wasn't just planting a seed of doubt in my mind. She was methodically replacing Clara's real memories with falsified ones, brick by brick. This was the core of her strategy, gaslighting by proxy. If Clara believed I was stressed, overworked, and forgetful, my own perceptions wouldn't matter. Then came the twist, delivered by my own wife. "Mom," Clara said, "I was looking into some virtual therapy options for you, for the grief. There's even this platform that offers support groups, and, well, they also have tools for cognitive wellness." My blood went cold. Of course. It was brilliant. Eleanor hadn't just searched for a neurologist for herself. She had masterfully played the part of fragile widow, leading Clara, her compassionate daughter, to find the exact type of help Eleanor wanted. "I think that's a great idea, Clara. I began." Eleanor reached out and placed a cool, dry hand on mine. Her eyes were shimmering with unshed tears, but underneath, I saw a flicker of triumph. "You're a good man," she whispered. Then she looked from me to Clara. "But it's not just me I worry about. You, Mark, you work so hard with all that pressure. It's so important to keep a clear head in your line of work, isn't it?" Her question hung in the air, a silken web. It wasn't a question. It was an anchor, pulling me down into the narrative she had constructed. Clara's face clouded with concern. I felt a surge of cold fury, but I bit it back. "Of course," I said, forcing a calm smile. "But I manage." "Brave boy," she said softly, patting my hand again. David used to say the same thing, right up until the end. Clara took the bait completely. "Mom is right," she said, her voice firm. "Mark, you're burning out. This virtual therapy platform. It has programs for couples too. Let's do it. For us." There was no way out. If I said no, I was unreasonable. If I said yes, I was voluntarily walking into the cage she had built for me. "Okay," I said, the word tasting like defeat. If you think it'll help, Clara. For us. Yes. Eleanor's answering smile was one of the most terrifying things I had ever seen. It was beatific, serene. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey walk calmly into a trap. Later that night, as I lay on the couch again, feigning sleep, I heard Eleanor's soft footsteps. She passed through the living room. I cracked an eye open just enough to see her pause by the orchids. She reached out, her fingers caressing a single white petal with a tenderness that seemed obscene. Then, she quietly slipped a small, digital voice recorder, no bigger than a tube of chapstick, from her robe pocket. She tucked it behind a pot of the largest orchid, the one with the clearest view of where I sit. It was nestled perfectly among the leaves, invisible. The sight of that digital recorder sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. It wasn't just in my head. This was real. My home was no longer a home. It was an observation chamber. My only option was to let her think her little trap was working. The next morning, I was a new man. I was cooperative. I apologized to Clara. You were right. I told her, my voice heavy with mock weariness. I've been feeling off. Maybe talking to someone is a good idea. I watched Clara's face flood with relief. Over her shoulder, I saw Eleanor in the kitchen doorway, sipping her tea, a faint, approving smile on her lips. She thought she was winning. Good. That afternoon, Clara helped me set my profile on the virtual therapy platform. We scheduled our first couple session for Wednesday. This wasn't therapy. It was a performance. I had 2 days to prepare. A key hint to her methods was her impeccable timing. She wasn't just a manipulative genius. She was a student of the digital age. She understood that if you control the information a person consumes, you can shape their reality. The plot twist arrived via email that evening. It was a standard confirmation for a therapy session, but it included a bio of the assigned therapist, a Dr. Lena Rask. I did a quick search. At the bottom of a university alumni page was a grainy photo from a student symposium 15 years ago. A younger Dr. Rask was accepting an award. Standing next to her, beaming with pride, was her faculty advisor. My blood turned to ice. It was Dr. Alistair Finch. This couldn't be a coincidence. Eleanor hadn't just nudged us toward therapy. She had guided us into a specific, predetermined web. I wasn't just being monitored by a manipulative mother-in-law. I was about to submit to psychological evaluation by someone with a direct link to the man whose reputation she might be trying to destroy, or whose work she might be trying to finish. The little black recorder sat hidden in the orchid, waiting. I walked over to the orchid, pretending to admire the flower. I looked directly at the spot where the recorder was hidden, and I smiled. My smile was a declaration of war. Eleanor wanted a show. I'd give her a masterpiece. That night, and all through the next day, I became the man she wanted me to be. I feigned distraction. I forgot where I put my keys. I even sat on the couch that afternoon, phone to my ear, staging a fake call with my boss. I understand the pressure, Bill, I said to a dead line, my voice full of practice exhaustion. My head's in the game. Mostly. It was a breadcrumb designed to make Eleanor feel secure. The real hidden secret wasn't just David's death. It was Eleanor's talent. This wasn't the clumsy meddling of a grieving mother-in-law. This was a sophisticated psychological campaign. Where does a retired librarian acquire a skill set like that? My countermove was born from that realization. She thinks she's a director, but she's forgotten that I'm the one who actually understands the technology. That evening, after Clara and Eleanor were asleep, I went back to the router's admin panel. The therapy platform had a loophole, a one-time, no-questions-asked therapist reassignment before the first session. I drafted a polite, carefully worded email to their support line from an anonymous account. I posed as a prospective customer with a hypothetical question about conflict of interest in malpractice cases, mentioning a Dr. X at Northwood Medical. Vague but pointed. It would trigger an internal ethics review. The company wouldn't admit fault, but they would quietly reassign us. Eleanor's chess move would be neutralized without her ever knowing I saw it coming. The next morning, I awoke on the sofa to an email notification on my phone. Regarding your upcoming appointment, My thumb hovered over the notification. I opened the email. Due to an unforeseen internal scheduling conflict, Dr. Rask is no longer available. You've been automatically reassigned to a new therapist, Dr. Julian Croft. A wave of relief washed over me. It worked. I had outmaneuvered her. When Clara told me about the change, I feigned mild surprise. I glanced at Eleanor. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, a recalculation, a minuscule crack in her serene facade. But pride comes before the fall. I had underestimated her reach. The plot twist, the real one, came that evening. Eleanor was knitting silently in the armchair across from me. "Julian Croft is a good man," she said, without looking up. The clicking stopped. My blood ran cold. I lowered my book slowly. "I'm sorry. Dr. Croft, your new therapist," she said, her voice placid. She finally looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. There was no pretense now, just a chilling, direct intelligence. He was David's grief counselor, after his first misdiagnosis, before Dr. Finch. The room tilted. My meticulously planned countermove was a complete and utter failure. I had jumped from a frying pan into a fire. Ras wasn't plan A. Ras was a decoy. She had anticipated my paranoia, my digging. She had built a trap with a visible flaw, so I would run straight into the real one. "He helped David a lot," she continued, slipping the mask back on, trying to cope with the stress of not being believed by his doctors, trying to hold on to his own mind. Dr. Croft wasn't just a therapist. He was a witness. He had seen this story before. I was being perfectly framed, set to repeat a history that this man had already been professionally conditioned to recognize. The screen blinked to life, and there he was, Dr. Julian Croft. Kind eyes, a salt and pepper beard, a book-lined office. Clara sat beside me, hopeful. I felt like I was facing my own executioner. Clara outlined her concerns. My long hours, my forgetfulness, my outburst. When it was my turn, I admitted to feeling burned out. Dr. Croft listened patiently. He didn't take notes. He just watched. "Mark," he said, leaning in slightly, "I want you to try to remember the incident with the laptop. Walk me through it. Not just what happened, but how it felt." "It felt confusing," I said carefully. "Disorienting. To be so sure of something, and then to be proven wrong. It makes you question things." His questions were a minefield. He never mentioned David or Eleanor. He didn't have to. I was being fitted for a dead man's psychological clothes. Then the horrible truth began to dawn on me. Eleanor wasn't trying to expose a doctor. She was trying to validate the story of David's death, to prove that the official story, the one she apparently invented, was plausible. Maybe she had filed a malpractice suit and lost. This wasn't for revenge. It was for vindication. To prove that a man like me could just crumble. Then came the twist. A single, innocuous question from Dr. Croft. "Clara," he said, "your mother's presence in the house. How has that adjustment been for you?" Clara hesitated. It's been a blessing," she said, a little too quickly. "But for you," Croft pressed gently, "how has it impacted your own sense of space?" And there, in her momentary pause, I saw it. Resentment. A tiny, hairline crack in the facade of the dutiful daughter. "It's been an adjustment," she finally admitted. "The house feels different. The lavender, the orchids." She'd noticed it all. Eleanor's plan had one fatal flaw. She never imagined that Clara, her most trusted pawn, had her own breaking point. The session ended with an assignment for us both to keep a private journal. That's when my mind went back to the recorder, still tucked in the orchid. She wanted a record of my breakdown. Fine. What if I gave her one? What if I sat here right now and recorded my own tearful confession of how the stress was getting to me? How I was paranoid. How I thought my mother-in-law was planting listening devices. A perfect recording of the lunatic she believed me to be. Then I could use a simple Bluetooth hack. What if I could make her perfect little orchid switch playlists? I sat there on the couch, the faint glow of my phone's screen illuminating my face. The plan was audacious, but it was the only move I had left. It was time to seize control of the story. I opened my phone's voice memo app, took a deep, shaky breath, and began to perform the breakdown of my life. Journal entry 1. I started, my voice cracking with calculated despair. I think I'm losing it. I even had this crazy thought that Eleanor planted a bug in the orchid, a listening device. How crazy is that? I ended the recording with a dry, choked sob. The next step required absolute precision. I waited until the dead of night. Crouching in my office, I ran a low-energy scan for her recorder, voice_rec_D7B. I had it. I paired with the device, and with a few lines of code, I initiated a file swap. My recorded confession was uploaded, replacing the hours of audio she had collected. The final touch? I unspooled a single, thread-like filament from an old speaker wire and, using tweezers, carefully tucked it deep into the soil of the largest orchid. An antenna. The climax arrived 2 days later, an hour before our next session with Dr. Croft. Eleanor reached into her knitting bag and pulled out a small MP3 player. "Clara, dear," she said, her voice trembling, "there's something you need to hear." I was so worried about Mark, I bought one of those sound-activated sleep recorders. She pressed play, and out of the tiny speaker came my voice. Clear, desperate, confessing my paranoia about her, about the orchids. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes, wide with horror, darted from the player to me. Eleanor looked at me, a mask of tragic pity on her face. This was her checkmate. "He needs help, my dear," Eleanor whispered. But Clara wasn't looking at her. She was staring at the orchid, at the single coppery glint of the wire I planted. Her gaze shifted from the wire to her mother's perfectly calm hands, to the surprisingly sophisticated MP3 player, and finally, to me. That flicker of resentment ignited into a full-blown blaze of dawning comprehension. She looked at the orchids, the potpourri, the thermostat. It wasn't one thing. It was everything. She had been living inside a curated reality, and the set dressing was finally becoming visible. "Mom," Clara said, her voice dangerously quiet, "where did you really get that recording?" Eleanor froze. It was the one variable she had never accounted for. Clara's intelligence. My wife, the loving, trusting, compassionate woman, was also the sharpest person I knew. Eleanor had pushed her too far, made the lie too perfect, and in its perfection, it revealed its own artifice. In that moment, I knew I had won. But what exactly was the prize? Our marriage was a wreck, built on a foundation of secrets and lies. Hers and now mine. Was this a victory? Or just a different kind of ruin? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the faint, persistent hum of the humidifier, tirelessly keeping the beautiful, poisonous orchids alive. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I had no idea what she was going to do next.